we're at real risk of normalizing political violence as a part of our democracy.
Bill Braniff, thanks for speaking with me today. Until recently, you led a program at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security focused on prevention of targeted violence and terrorism. The work that you were doing in the CP3 program focused on preventing these kinds of attacks. Can you talk a little bit about what those programs were?
From school shootings and grievance-based workplace violence to hate-fueled violence to terrorism, we needed an approach out of the federal government that would address all of those different forms of violence. And so we looked to the public health community, and specifically the over 3 decades of work on violence prevention from places like the Centers for Disease Control that has been creating evidence-based programs for suicide prevention, intimate partner violence prevention, for violence against children prevention, and community-based violence. Out of the 1,172 interventions that we funded through our grant program at CP3, 93.5% of the individuals who were exhibiting threatening behavior got help. They got access to a clinician or a caring professional. In 6.5% of the incidents, the persons had already broken the law or were an imminent threat to public safety, and they were referred to law enforcement. And that wasn't the point of the intervention, but there was that safety net there for when that person really was an imminent risk to their community. We could balance public health and public safety through these multidisciplinary programs.
And so what CP3 was also doing, I know from my long-time work on reporting on violence prevention, was really spreading this approach to preventing violence throughout the country, right, through partnerships with state and local entities. Given that we're in this heightened environment of political extremism and attacks and concern about national security, why shut down CP3? What is your view of that? I mean, how would you explain that in this environment when you have a program that's designed precisely to really advance what the country is doing to deal with issues of terrorism, school shootings, and so on?
I don't think that CP3 was targeted by the Trump administration specifically. I think that CP3 has been dismantled out of ignorance. A lot of the headquarters-based offices within the Department of Homeland Security are being drastically reduced in size or shuttered, and CP3 was among them. This is incredibly short-sighted. Ignorance is not an excuse for what's happening. The primary mission of the Department of Homeland Security, as enshrined in the Homeland Security Act of 2002, is to prevent terrorism. And CP3 was trying to find a way to get traction in this prevention space, and we got it in the last couple of years. So we were normalizing this at the state and local level. Why? Because it's pragmatic. It's cost-effective. It works. You have law enforcement officers around the country begging to get help from more mental health professionals and social workers because law enforcement officers are not equipped to do this kind of upstream intervention. We had $99 million of eligible grant applications for our $18 million grant pool, which means we were wildly oversubscribed. We were bringing these folks together and blending their assets.
As you and I both know, there's a whole range of political ideology and extremism that feeds into targeted violence. That said, we also know there's been a long, steady rise in far-right domestic terrorism in the last handful of years. I'm curious your view of sort of the long-term impact of losing this type of work in the federal government, and particularly as it relates to things like, say, the January 6 offenders and clemency for all those people who were, convicted and imprisoned for participating in the insurrection of January 6th, including a lot of violent offenders too, right, who attacked police officers. Some of the groups associated with that event are, again, instigating on social media for potentially violent behavior. What do you see as the long-term impact of that wave of clemency that happened at the beginning of this year with the Trump administration? What message is that sending, and what does it do in terms of the political environment that we're in with the problem of extremism?
It's such a good set of questions. We're at real risk of normalizing political violence as a part of our democracy. That is a potential death blow to a free and open society. It's not to say that these things can't gravitate back towards a norm of nonviolence, but right now we are creating permission structures for individuals to dehumanize the transgender community, to dehumanize Jews. We're at risk of normalizing school shootings among youth who don't imagine a healthy future for themselves and are succumbing to this kind of nihilistic manipulation that we're seeing in movements like 764. And when these norms are accepted at a societal level and encouraged at a political level, they become entrenched and really difficult to reverse. And so what we were doing at CP3 and what we're doing now at my current organization at American University is trying to normalize prevention. Normalize the idea that, in fact, we can and should build thriving communities where individuals don't need to buy the violent empowerment that either a politician or an online groomer is selling that leads to violence. The things you've listed are incredibly concerning, and we all have to decide that we care about this issue. If we don't, if we decide we're going to be apathetic about it, the violence is going to win the day because it's going to capture the news headlines. It's going to capture the algorithms. And the path of least resistance is to surrender to violence as a norm in our current information environment. And so it's going to take intentional decision-making by all of us as individuals to decide that's not the country that we want to live in or the community that we want to live in.
Is it your hope or your expectation that this will come back more strongly in the federal government in the future, this kind of prevention work?
Yes, it has to. The threat is growing and manifesting in more and different ways. There's been nearly a 2,000% increase in mass casualty attacks in the United States since the early 1990s. There are approximately 3 violent attacks per day that either are plotted or carried out in the United States. School shootings are up linearly since the Columbine attack of 1999. Political assassinations are being normalized. We have to marshal resources to push back on this. So I do believe it'll come back. I think Americans will demand it, but only if they know that violence is preventable, which it is. And so it's really important that we continue to push on this now, but ultimately demand it of our federal government, because again, this is doable work.